Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, I'm Flight Lieutenant Peter Lisney, and in this episode, find out what it's really like to learn to fly an RAF helicopter. We'll also reheat a few stories, just in case you missed them. But first, see if you can identify this noise. Find out if you're right at the end of this episode. Now, learning to fly a helicopter is notoriously challenging. So, what does it take to earn your pilot's wings? We asked one of the RAF's most recent graduates from No. 1 Flying Training School at RAF Shawbury. Our correspondent is Flight Sergeant Gemma Bibby.
Flying is a learning process that never stops.
I was one trip away from the "are you really suitable to do this" trip, which is a little bit of a scary place to be. I don't think that anyone flying for BA has to do this. Do I really want to be here? So I'm a Flight Lieutenant Curry. I've been in the Air Force about 5 years now, and I've just finished helicopter training up at RAF Shawbury in Shropshire.
Tell me about the day of your graduation, because you had a bit of a special visitor during that day, didn't you?
We passed out in front of Colonel Tim Peake, who's the honorary colonel of 9 Regiment Army Air Corps, who are the number plate, if you will, of half of the flying training school at Shawbury. It was his first time up to the school, and actually his first time back there since he himself had graduated from his instructor's course, which I think he'd said had been about 10 or 15 years beforehand. He said that it was nice to be back amongst his military family, but it was quite impressive for us actually standing there being given our wings, which is supposed to be this crowning achievement that you've worked towards for years and years and years. And he's standing there as an astronaut and saying, actually, I've got astronaut wings, but the wings that you're wearing right now are the ones that I'm more proud to wear, which was really nice of him to say.
So you must have felt very proud at that moment.
Oh, yes, certainly. And he's a really nice guy as well. We got the opportunity to speak to him afterwards, and really down to earth, if you'll pardon the pun.
Here's what Colonel Tim had to say on the day.
What a wonderful honour to present the wings today, because it took me back completely to my own wings parade, and I know how much this day means to them. I'm very proud of what they've achieved. They should be rightly proud as well. And it is a huge amount of effort, and it's something that they've probably been working at for many, many years, and this is the culmination of that effort. So it's a great day for them and a huge honour for me to be able to present their wings. I think the main thing is that aviation is a journey. You gain your wings and you have achieved this, but you're right at the very start of your military flying career, and it's a learning process, and flying is a learning process that never stops. Every time I jump in an aircraft, I'm still learning something new, and I try to learn something new because that's the great thing about flying. You have the ability to always improve. So I'm really excited for them. They've got great careers ahead of them and a really exciting journey ahead of them. I think the main thing is to embrace the opportunities that come their way. Military aviation, a lot happens in a short space of time. It can sometimes be disruptive. You have to be very flexible in your mindset and your approach. But if you approach things in the right mindset, then it's a wonderful career. You can grasp those opportunities and you can really make it what you want it to be.
Can you tell me a bit about the process that you've had to go through to get to where you are today?
I was lucky in that I did well enough to sort of choose my fate. I probably ought to explain that a little bit. So, of course, you can go fast jets, you can go helicopters, or you can go onto multi-engine platforms, which is like the big transport stuff. So iStar out of Waddington or transports out of Brize Norton. the demands of the service and sort of how well you do at that elementary stage really determines either what you're best suited for. So if you're no good at aerobatics, which I wasn't, then you're probably not going to go fast jet. But if you're really good at navigation, for example, then that sort of opens up your options a little bit, because they all do bits of navigation. So I was really lucky in that I got to put helicopters as my first choice, and after an inflatable assaults course, which involved me getting quite wet and quite cold, I was able to go helicopters, which was great.
So is that something that you've always wanted to do?
No, it wasn't. I was cleaning out my emails the other day and I actually came across the pro forma that I'd sent to the squadron before joining, and as well as lots of things that said that I enjoy running and hill walking, which is in just about everyone's pro forma. There was something in there that said that I really wanted to fly F-35, and I can't work out why I'd written that, because it was probably about halfway through EFT I realised that all the instructors that I got on really well with were all ex-helicopter pilots at that time. And I really enjoyed having someone else there in the aircraft to chat with and to talk things through. So why I'd want to go onto a single engine aircraft that flies very, very high, or a single crew aircraft rather, that flies very, very high and goes very, very fast, considering I enjoyed being with the crew and being down low, that I couldn't put my finger on. So I put helicopters first. The course starts off, and you, much like elementary flying training, it's just you and an instructor in a helicopter, an Airbus 135 Juno, so a brand new helicopter. It's got all the kit in it in the world that in that first 90 hours you're not allowed to use. The thing's got an autopilot, which would make flying really easy, so you're not allowed to use it. It's got a moving map that tells you exactly where you are, so you're not allowed to use it, and you have to learn how to do everything by the basics. I found that part of the course actually quite challenging. Towards the end of that, just the trying to do everything at once and move from one regime of flight to another. So maybe you're doing some navigation and the instructor goes, okay, that's good enough. Now show me how to do a confined area. So take the helicopter into a small landing field. And then you jump from that and he says, okay, that was good enough. Now take me back for an instrument recovery, which is where you fold a little hood down on your helmet so you can't see out of the windows, which are your sort of primary reference when you're flying around, and you're just staring at the instruments you've got in front of you, and you have to come back to the airfield, which is always quite weird when you look up and immediately see a huge runway in front of you and you think, oh, well, I can just land on that. That wasn't so hard after all. But I found jumping between all those phases quite difficult. But that's the first sort of 90 hours of the course. The next sort of 45 hours, again, that's where you start to get introduced to having a crewman in the back. So you don't start off with the junior crewman at this point. You jump straight in with the more experienced crewmen, the people who've come off of frontline aircraft types. So some seeking mates still knocking around. But mostly Puma and Chinook, and they've got a wealth of experience. They've seen it all before. They know the mistakes you're going to make before you make them. The number of times I got a tap on the shoulder from one of them and just a shake of the head of, you've just started to do something quite silly, and you'll then go, oh yes, what I meant to say, sir, was that I'm going to do this. And that was a great fun part of the course, because suddenly you're starting to do things like you go on landaways on the first part of that course, that first 90 hours where it's just you and the instructor. But because it's just you and the instructor, it feels like the spotlight's on you all the time, and you need to be doing all the navigation, flying the aircraft, making all the right radio calls, and doing it all completely correctly. But as soon as you introduce another person, the atmosphere changes. I suppose it's like if you're learning to drive and you go for the first time, you're not driving with your instructor or you're not driving with your parents, you're driving with a mate, and suddenly there's someone there who's not out to just go, oh, did you mean to do that? I mean, of course they will. But it means that they can go, oh, why are you doing the navigation and doing the radio calls at the same time? I'll do the navigation, then you can concentrate on what you're going to say. And immediately you can feel yourself getting better because they've given you so much more capacity. So you get to go on a landaway on that course, and just going around to places you've never been to and things you've never seen. It gives room for a whole load of hijinks. Getting lost in your own backyard if you're lucky enough to go and fly over your own house, looking up, being completely confused as to where you are, and then going, hold on, don't I? Oh, I know exactly where we are now. It's just great fun. But then I think the best part of the course for me was the sort of last 90 hours of it. So we've done about 90 on the basic phase, 45 in the middle, and about, well, it's probably a little bit less than that actually. It's probably about 60 hours on the final part of the course, which is 60 Squadron. And that's where you get introduced to the trainee crewman, and the having a trainee pilot up front and a trainee crewman in the back, and a crewman instructor and an instructor pilot, all together. It just makes for some great fun.
So did you have any particular funny moments or any bad moments? Did anything go horribly wrong?
It wouldn't be flying training if you didn't have moments where you went, oh, I really don't think I'm getting this. As I mentioned in that first part of the course, I really struggled jumping between all the phases, and there's a system called air warnings, which they tell you it's not a chopping block. They tell you that you're not going to lose your job if you fail 3 trips in a row. They tell you it's just there so that you can get some more experienced instructors, go up, have another go at the trip, have someone try and teach you a slightly different way. But try telling that to someone who is one ride away from the trip where they go, "Are you really suitable for this?" That's where I was at the end of that squadron. Luckily enough, I had a really very good instructor at that point, a friend actually, who took me up and said, "Right, show me exactly what you're doing at this phase of flight," and he fixed it in one trip. But as I said, I'd got to air warning 2. I was one trip away from the "Are you really suitable to do this" trip, which is a little bit of a scary place to be.
What did you do to overcome that? Obviously, you had some help from a friend. Did it worry you? Did you think that you were going to have to change course, or did you just think, actually, no, I'll just get my head down and I'll work this out?
That's an interesting question. I suppose I chatted through it with friends on the ground. I did something called armchair flying, which is, I suppose it's the same with anything. You rehearse it in your own mind before you go off and do it. But then the only real solution to my problem was going out and flying the aeroplane. Or flying the helicopter rather. So having those 2 additional hours with this particular instructor who I got on with really worked for me, and I was able to sort of work through the problem, strip it back to the basics, and actually do what I was supposed to be doing at first. As I said, it just all got a little bit much for me in that phase, and I had to remember, what's that phrase? Walk before you can run. Yeah, strip it back to the basics.
How have the advances in technology helped you?
So flying training devices or simulators have really changed the game. There are days when the cloud base is right down on the deck and it's freezing rain and you need to go up and fly straight and level somewhere. If, well, there's cloud on the deck and it's freezing rain, there's going to be no horizon, so you can't work out if you're flying straight and level by the proper techniques at all. But the simulator is always going to be there, and it's always going to be whatever weather you choose to do. So an example is that we have to do a procedural instrument flying phase, and that requires you to have a complete cloud from surface up to 10,000 feet and no visibility. If you can get 10 days of that on the trot in order for someone to do a phase at the drop of a hat, then you've obviously got some divine intervention that no one else has. But in the simulator, you just dial the settings in, and there you are. You're more than ready to fly from Shawbury to Manchester or wherever it is that you need to go for your test. And the simulator will do all of that perfectly and really well. Another thing it's really good for, actually, is because it's got a full cockpit around you. It's not full motion, but it does have all the controls that you would see in the real aircraft. Is you can have some quite complex emergencies. So I've spoken about emergency handling and about having the person in the other seat or the person at the back read the checklist to you and make sure that you're turning off the correct thing or doing the correct actions. In the simulators, you can actually flick those switches and it will change things going on. In the real aircraft, it's generally frowned upon to set fire to an engine in flight, but in the simulators, the person down the back, the simulator operator, can press a button, and before you know it, the firelight comes on, and all the gauges start going haywire, and you have to make a decision quite quickly about what to do. And when you've been flying around doing just a normal sortie, it can get it starts to feel quite real. The pulse gets going as soon as the audio warner comes on and the little light starts flashing. You go, oh wow, I've actually got to deal with this. In the past, the first time someone would see that would be if they actually saw it for real. I had a friend who was on Puma maybe 10 years ago now, who said that the first time he got an engine fire on start, or the only time he's ever got an engine fire on start, rather than the hand signal, the hand waving, or someone going to get an extinguisher, all that happened was that the person out front just looked at the engine and went, "Oh." So it takes that first shock out of what's going to happen when something really complicated happens. Or as I've said, if it's just for something really simple, like just learning to fly straight and level, if you can do that in a simulator, it means that you can do that in the middle of December at 6 o'clock at night when it's dark and raining and horrible outside. So you can actually get out the other end of the training system much, much quicker.
I saw from your interviews for the graduation that it's actually Triservice. How did you find working with the other services?
The Triservice banter is absolutely atrocious. The Navy and the Army have their own language that they choose to speak, not because it makes any sense to them, but just because it annoys everyone else. But, I've flown with Navy instructors, Army instructors, Navy and Army and Air Force instructors, obviously, Navy and Army and Air Force, crewmen instructors, and trainee crewmen as well from all three services. And as soon as you get into the aircraft, okay, you might get one of them saying, "Oh, would you just put us a little bit to port," if they're feeling particularly contrary that day. But they'll all cut from the same cloth. It really helps that all three services go through the same training, because helicopters out on the front line work in a tri-service environment all the time. So back in Afghanistan, for example, the Chinook would be flying along with a pair of Apaches, and those could have all come from the same training system a couple of courses apart, and all know each other, and then all be flying and working together, even though they're from different services. Just that commonality really helps.
You talked a little bit about what you did while you were holding. What were the positives and the negatives?
So one thing that people don't talk about a lot is the fact that the flying training system does take a long time. It's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of trying to launch so many aircraft and so many sorties and produce so many pilots a year, is that you're not always going to be at the front of the queue, the front of the pipeline. So there are going to be times when you go on hold. I've probably spent in total just about 2 years, maybe slightly more of my time holding. But during that time, I was still an officer in the Air Force. So it's not like you go on hold and you sit around and do absolutely nothing. You'll be sent somewhere, or more often than not, you can actually choose to go somewhere. You'll be presented with some options, or you can go out and find your own job. You can go on and find some quite interesting things to do, or some quite interesting places to go, where you'll learn about what the rest of the Air Force does outside of your own branch or trade. If I'd just been in the flying training system, I would probably understandably think that the Air Force was all about flying, 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 which is great fun, but it's not really reflective of, we've got 33,000 people in the Air Force and only around 1,500 of them are pilots. There's probably, I would say, around 2,500 aircrew total at a guess. But it means that you can go off and see some places you wouldn't expect to see and do some things you wouldn't expect to do. So what have I done? I've been out to the Middle East, which was really interesting. So I got to go on a short deployment where I got to go and see sort of what that was like, the going away process. I was a media officer. I was covering an international event that was going on. And it meant that I got to work with photographers. I got to work with air ops people, air traffic, logisticians, everyone to try and make this work. And it sort of brought into focus the Air Force is made up of so many different moving parts, and everyone's got their own little corner of it that they are the absolute expert in, and you sort of have to pull on that expertise when you need it, but also understand what they're going through as well. So friends and family, I think they've got an impression that being a pilot in the Air Force is basically Top Gun. Unfortunately, I'm not very good at volleyball. I can't ride a motorbike, and I'm too tall to be Tom Cruise. So none of those things are really going to work out for me. What it is um, it's hard work, certainly, but there are times when you sort of have to be a bit proactive and make your own work. So even during the about two and a bit years of holding, I've still been busy. I've still been able to go, you know what, actually, there are things I want to achieve, or things I want to see, or things I want to do, and I've been able to do them outside, alongside the training while being on hold, and that has put some pressures on sort of the home and family life. I've been living away from my partner now for a good few years, so living away during the week, just because of that's where she works, as opposed to where the places I've been stationed are. But that's just part and parcel of military life. Sometimes is that if there's things that you want to achieve, sometimes you need to sort of give a little bit in other areas. If I hadn't joined the Air Force, I honestly don't know what I'd be doing now. Some of the places I've been, the people I've met, the experiences I've got, some of the best things I've done. So even the hard things, the things which are funny but not fun. So they're not fun while you're doing them, but they'll make for a funny story afterwards. One that was funny for everyone watching, but not for me, was the day that I went to the Dunker. So the Dunker is probably an apt description of what it actually does. It's like being a rich tea biscuit. But it's called the Helicopter Underwater Escape Trainer. It's down at Yeovilton in Somerset, and it teaches you how to get out of a helicopter that's crashed into the water. So as aircrew, you'll fly over the water, and this is just something you have to do. It's part and parcel of the survival training. So I am a confident swimmer, and thought that I could hold my breath for about a minute and a half underwater, which I felt like it was okay. But I was then strapped into what equates to, if you imagine a roller coaster ride, I was strapped into something that looked not unlike that, and suspended above a swimming pool. Then all the lights were turned off. Then I was unceremoniously dropped into the water. The whole contraption turned upside down, and at that point, when all violent motion ceases, you have to try and get out. I made it out the first time, but you have to complete the serial 6 times. To give you a spoiler at the end of the story, I completed it 9 times. I tried to swim out of the front window, which is a large plexiglass contraption. I kicked the safety diver in the chest while trying to work out exactly where I was going. He wasn't very happy about that. I eventually made it out of the correct exit, but I had lost a piece of the survival equipment along the way. I'd made it out without it, but apparently I then had to swim back in and get it. And at the end of the serial, as I said, I felt like a rich tea biscuit who's been dunked too many times. But the Spanish spend 3 days doing that course that we spend doing a morning of. So what they do, I honestly don't know, and I never want to do an exchange to Spain. I remember being on my survival training, the initial survival training you do, where you get thrown out into the woods for a week to sort of see if you'll survive. I remember very vividly during a night where I don't think it stopped raining for about 3 days, saying, I don't think that anyone flying for BA has to do this. Do I really want to be here? And at the time I felt miserable, but now I can look back on it and go, you know what, that was actually quite a lot of fun. But that's an experience that if I hadn't joined the RAF, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to have. What else have I done? I've done sailing, which I'd never done before, Nordic skiing. So someone walked into the office one day and said, would you like to learn to ski? And I had images of carving up the slopes and then going for a nice cold beer afterwards. And I went, yeah, you know what? That sounds really good. What I then discovered was that it was Nordic skiing. So yes, you carve up the slopes, but you're going uphill, which is a lot more like walking, but then walking with 2 large planks of wood on your feet. But you know what? Actually, that was great fun. And you still got to have a beer afterwards. You just felt like you'd earned it a little bit more.
Have you got any regrets at all?
Well, that night on the survival exercise where it didn't stop raining, I regretted joining the Air Force as a whole. And there was a time, there's something called the, colloquially known as the Dunker, which I think gives more of an impression of what it's like than the helicopter underwater escape trainer. So imagine you're on a roller coaster ride, you're strapped in, then it's dark, then you're in the water, then you're upside down, now get out. There were about 2 or 3 seconds there where I went, I really don't want to be here, which was good because the whole point was to escape. But in terms of larger regrets, I think I'd like to go to some more places and see some more things, but I don't think I regret any of the times that I wouldn't call them regrets for the past, I'd call them aspirations for the future.
So following on from that, what is next?
So we talk nowadays about lifelong learning, and well, from my perspective, it never really stops. So next for me is a little bit of a hold, during which time I'll see some more of the Air Force or some more of the other services now. And now that I'm more qualified in the air, it opens up more choices of what I can do on the ground. But in 2022, I'll be starting the Chinook Operational Conversion Unit, which is currently at RAF Benson, where I'll be learning to fly a 10-ton helicopter with 2 different types of blades on top, which spin in opposite directions. The physics of which I don't understand yet, but as I said, that's the point of lifelong learning. But on the ground as well, there's other things to do. So I'm sure I'll find some time to fit in some more force development. So like the skiing I did before, but this time I'll be sure to ask for all the details, so I won't find myself unexpectedly going uphill. But also there's some academic courses to do. So junior officer development courses, for example, to teach you more about air power and the way it's used.
What about long term? What are your ambitions for your long term future?
At the moment, flying. Get back flying. I've not flown for either a month or 6 weeks at this point, and it already feels like it's too long. It's a bug. I think it was Da Vinci who said that those who have tasted flight will forever spend their days with their eyes cast skyward, longing to return, which for a man who never flew, I think is quite prophetic. But I think it's true. To anyone who wants to join up and become a pilot, I'd say go into it with both eyes open. So it's all very well watching Top Gun, reading the books, even talking to people that are doing it right now. But find out exactly what the training system is going to be like. Find out how long it's going to take. Think about what you're going to find most difficult or challenging about it, and then go, you know what, is this really for me? Because if you want to fly, you can get a private pilot's license on the weekend, and you can go and decide what you're going to do on your own time. But provided you know what it's going to be like when you get in, and you're still okay with that, then you will find a way to make it happen.
This is Reheat, a look back at some recent news stories from the RAF. I'm LAC Victoria Andrews. The Commander US Space Command, General James H. Dickinson, has held his first visit to the headquarters of UK Space Command at RAF High Wycombe. Speaking of his visit, General Dickinson said, "Our allies and partners are the greatest advantage we have, and the UK remains one of our closest allies in all domains. Building strong alliances with like-minded partners such as the UK is a core part of our strategy to preserve free and open access to the benefits of space that has enabled all of us to prosper." Air Chief Marshal Sir Mike Wixton has made an address to mark Armed Forces Week.
We can be very proud of everything our people do, protecting the UK and our allies around the globe, and projecting the United Kingdom on a global stage.
He also acknowledged the contribution of personnel from the Triservices who've supported the national effort during the pandemic. You can view videos and articles about Armed Forces Week on RAF social and web channels. And finally, Royal Air Force F-35s have taken part in a multinational training exercise from the UK Carrier Strike Group. Falcon Strike 21 was led by the Italian Air Force and provided a unique opportunity to enhance the interoperability of partners and allies. A pilot from 617 Squadron commented how the exercise was allowing them to hone their tactics, techniques and procedures to enhance the capabilities of the jet and the carrier strike group against a range of current and future threats. That's Reheat on Inside Air.
I'm SAC Simon Ross with this episode's Name That Noise. That was the sound of a de Havilland's Chipmunk performing a stall turn. From the late 1940s, the Chipmunk was utilised as the RAF's primary trainer aircraft. The Battle of Britain Memorial Flight has 2 Chipmunks, invaluable for training pilots to fly Spitfires and Hurricanes, as they have the same tail-wheel landing gear. The stall turn we just heard is an aerobatic manoeuvre. In the Chippy, the stall turn begins as a gentle dive. Then the aircraft is pulled up and flown vertically until it stops in mid-air. At this point, it's quite normal for the engine to stop, but as the propeller normally keeps windmilling and gravity returns, fuel flows again, allowing the engine to spark back into life. Full rudder is then applied, allowing the aircraft to cartwheel to one side. Just before the aircraft is pointing vertically down, apply full opposite rudder to align the aircraft, then simply accelerate down the hill before easing out of the dive.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review and subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.